diving deep into the source, bringing love so we can release that which we no longer need. Diving deep into the source, bringing love so we can release that which we no longer need. Diving deep into the source, bringing love so we can release that which we no longer need. Diving deep into the source, bringing love so we can release that which we no longer need. Diving deep into the source, bringing love so we can release that which we no longer need. Diving deep into the source, bringing love so we can release that which we no longer need.
Aloha. Good evening. This is Andrew Aloha live out of Flagstaff, Arizona. The Spiritual Mix Productions on BlogTalkRadio, free conference call, and YouTube, establishing and maintaining relationships with you, buddy. Aloha, welcome to tonight's Andrew Aloha Live. Tonight we're doing a three-part series of the 2018 MUFON Symposium Series. Tonight we're talking with Dr. Donderi, all the way out of Canada, in the American Personality Inventory, API, a test to evaluate abduction reports. Aloha, Don, how are you?
I'm well, Andrew. Thanks for inviting me.
And thank you for being here. I was just trying to, and this is the second of the three-part series that we're doing. Next in July, we're going to be interviewing with Randall Nickerson, I believe his name is. He's doing a documentary.
Right, I know Randall.
Yeah, you know him well. And we're going to be talking to Don here in a little bit. Just to let you know, since its formation in 1959, MUFON has been dedicated to finding out the truth about UFOs through its mission of investigation, research, and education for the benefit of humanity. This year, instead of looking back at historical evidence, we look forward, not to disclosure, but to a time in the very near future when they are present and integrated into our society. What then? What will the future be for humanity, and what changes might we see? The American Personality Inventory, API, is a test that was developed by Ted Davis, Bud Hopkins, and Donderi, or Don. You're interesting. Your last name's pretty interesting there now. Donderi there now.
Anyhow, you have to say it twice.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I feel like I'm stuttering or something. Donderi to assess the validity of a report that someone has been abducted by extraterrestrial. It consists of 65 true-false questions and can be completed in about 10 minutes, either on paper or on a digital service. Dr. Donderi is a retired associate professor of psychology at McGill University in Montreal. He is also a former associate dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research at McGill. Likewise, he is the co-founder and principal consultant of a Toronto-based human factors and ergonomics. What's ergonomics?
It's the scientific study of humans at work, trying to make the work safer and more efficient, using psychological principles and knowing how the human body works. So you get people to make desks that are at the right height, computer screens that are easy to understand, instructions that people can follow, and controls and displays that they can use to fly an airplane or drive a boat or whatever. In other words, putting psychology to work in the work world. That's what it's all about.
Got it. Our ergonomic consulting firm, a graduate, a student of Cornell, that's Cornell University, is that correct?
That's right.
His latest written works being UFOs, ETs, and alien abductions, a scientist looked at the evidence. For more information on Dr. Donderi and MUFON, you can go to www.mufonsymposium.com and you'll find their information there. And we're going to come back and talk to them, Dr. Don. First of all, I do want to give a big aloha to all of our underwriters that help make this show happen from week to week, month to month, year to year, beginning. And I apologize because my sinuses are going crazy right now. But anyhow, it's a 90-day Ascension journey at www.90dayascensionjourney.com. When you sign up for the 90-day Ascension journey, you will be facilitated with defining and redefining your soul through life purpose. You will be assisted with finding out what Ascension means to you. On this journey, you will be provided with tools, techniques, and assistance to empower you to connect and reconnect with yourself and your emotions and feelings in mind, body, and spirit. Through a universal soul-centered process, you will be going through a lifelong transformation that will allow you to move forward through your endeavors and never look back if you dare. And just to let you know, I've kept tabs with some of the students that have, some of the people that have already gone through the journey, and it just seems like the progress keeps going. They don't stop. They just keep progressing more and more. So it's a very progressive program, mentoring program. If you want to check it out, I did I did write the book version of this about 3 years ago, called the 90-Day Ascension Journey, and which is is meant to supplement this journey. You can actually get it on Amazon and also on Kindle for 99 cents. You can get it on Kindle, so that you can check it out, and you know it's very user friendly. And if you have any questions, of course, you can get a hold of me, and we can go from there. We also have the Anovate at www.spiritualimageproductions.anovate.com. Anovate being a French word, with over 25,000 scientific papers published on colostrum, a 90-day guarantee, and winner of the Healthy Living People's Choice Award twice over. Anovate focuses on helping people with weight loss, anti-aging, heart disease, diabetes, depression, high blood pressure, asthma, allergies, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammation, gout, lupus, fibromyalgia, Crohn's disease, cancer, ulcers, and the polio virus, chronic infections, digestive disorders, Alzheimer's disease, autoimmune disease, thymus gland, mental clarity, maintenance and protection of the immune system, synthesis and repair of RNA, DNA, much more. And just to let you know, I just got word that Dr. Oz, I believe they told me that Dr. Oz is now endorsing this. And also, I don't know if you ever watched that movie with Mel Gibson, and I can't. It was one of his first movies that he ever came out with. Anyhow, the other guy that was on that movie is also endorsing this. I don't know why I can't remember this. But anyhow, you can look it up for yourself. Just look up Mel Gibson, and you'll see one of his first movies when he was on that. The other actor that's endorsing this is on that movie. You know, we also have Maha Bikini Lorraine at www.mahadbikini.com. Maha Bikini Lorraine's life has been a personal journey exploring sexuality and spirituality for over 20 years. She's a certified tantric counselor and tantric healer and a certified mind and sound teacher. Maha Bikini Lorraine is also a graduate of Margot Non-Geolong Sky Dancing Tantra Facilitating Program, as well as a current member of the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists Club, as well as a charter member of the Association of Sexual and Professionals. She regularly attends trainings and conferences to keep current with the latest research and information on sexual education. And then finally, we do have the 2018 MUFON Symposium at www.mufonsymposium.com. MUFON is the oldest and largest civilian UFO investigative organization in the United States, probably in the world, I don't know, but with over 4,000 members worldwide in 43 countries in all 50 states. MUFON also has 500 certified field investigators deployed worldwide, including myself. This year's 2018 MUFON Symposium will be held at the Crown Plaza in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, from the 27th to the 29th of July, with its theme being UFOs, extraterrestrials, and the future of humanity. Various speakers from all over the world, all over the country, I think all over the world as well, will be presenting, including Peter Robbins, Dr. Donderi, who we're talking to now, and Randall Nickerson. Register now for the symposium at the website, and we'll see you there. If you happen to see me there, give me a big high five, and at least acknowledge that you're there, and then so I can at least say hi and check it out. So anyhow, we're back to Dr. Don here now. Well, first of all, here let me go backtrack a little bit, because there was a couple of things I wanted to check out. Well, I tell you what. Let's start with this, Don. Can you? Are you from Canada? Can you just give me just an overview of who Don is, where you were born, where you were raised, and how you got involved in all this? Wherever you want to start.
Absolutely, Andrew. Here we go. First of all, I was born in Manhattan, New York City, raised in Queens and Long Island, spent some time near Washington, D.C. during the war, the Second World War, when my father was in the Navy, then we moved to Long Island again. I went to university at the University of Chicago in Chicago, Illinois, graduated from there, went to Cornell University where I got a Ph.D. in experimental psychology. While I was being a graduate student, I was also working at IBM for their Federal Systems Division, and I worked on high-altitude reconnaissance problems for American military aircraft. Then I went to McGill University, where I started work as a lecturer and gradually rose through the ranks to the rank of associate professor. I was also, as you mentioned earlier, an associate dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research. I published many papers. In about 1965, I did research, by the way, on human visual perception and memory. So those are my research specialties, and I'm supposed to know more about those things than anything else. And in about the 1960s, the mid-1960s, it became obvious to me, as a student of human visual perception, that what people were reporting as UFOs were not all made up. They weren't imaginary. All these people weren't faking it. All these people weren't hallucinating. All of these people just didn't have a bad trip. In fact, they were seeing things that were there and that were behaving in ways that no human-manufactured machine could behave. And remember, I got a bit of a start at this when I was a graduate student, because I was working on the most advanced human aerial machines, U.S. bombers, as an IBM researcher on visual perception and remote and reconnaissance. So my professional judgment was that people were seeing real things. These real things were not made here on Earth because we don't know how to make them, and so they were, by definition, extraterrestrial. So that's when I began to take a more serious interest in this whole area, and I've been interested in it ever since, which is basically somewhat over 50 years. And the evidence goes back at least to 1947, because that's when the first serious UFO reports began to come in, some from Washington State, some from your neighboring state, New Mexico, and that's where this all began.
Wow.
And that's where my interest began as well.
So let's go ahead.
No, I live in Canada. I'm a citizen of both countries. My wife and children were raised here basically because we married and moved to Canada a few years afterwards, and so I'm basically happy and at home in both countries. Happen to live in Montreal right now.
Now, your wife is Canadian, is that correct?
Oh, no, my wife was also born in New York City. We both grew up in the same city and have the same sort of background.
Got it. So first of all, your dad was in the Navy, and what did he do in the Navy?
Well, that's kind of interesting because my father, who was the son of Italian immigrants, was an art director and had his own art business in New York City. And during the war, he volunteered to join the Navy, and the Navy put him to work doing exactly the same thing, designing and producing training manuals for pilots and for sailors and for other people who needed specialized skills. So his work during the war was out of Washington, D.C. The work involved getting artists and writers together to put together manuals on how to fly airplanes, how to navigate airplanes, what to do if you're shot down, what to do, how to find the other guy and shoot him down, all these useful things that have to be trained.
Right.
And that's what he did for a living, what he did for the U.S. government and for our country during the war.
Oh, interesting. And then your mom, what did your mom do growing up?
Well, it's interesting you're asking. These are interesting questions. My mother, first of all, raised two children, my sister and myself. She was a professional woman, very skilled at administering things, and administered part of a school district and the library in our local town. And before that, during the Depression, she worked as a typist during times when times were hard, and married my father during the Depression when they both were poor and just making it on their own in New York City.
Got it. So they now your parents weren't they weren't immigrants. They were born in the United States. Is that correct?
My father was the son of Italian immigrants. My mother comes from a family that has been here for many years.
Got it. Interesting. And so now, Don, when you were growing up, did you experience any paranormal activity, any UFOs, aliens, ghosts, or anything like that?
Not at all, Andrew. But what I did do was this. In 1947, that was when a man named Kenneth Arnold, flying over the Cascade Mountains in Washington State, saw 9 silvery objects flying between 2 mountain peaks. And when he landed his airplane, he talked about that to some people. And then when he landed his airplane at the next stop, which is where he was traveling home to, he was met by a reporter who heard about his reports. And that story made the national press. And the headline was, "Pilot Sees Flying Saucers Over Cascades in Washington State." And that, in 1947, was where basically the UFO story, the flying saucer story, began. There were indications before that, but that was the first widely publicized event. And that event was picked up by the Associated Press, published in newspapers everywhere, and people began to be interested, and they began to report what they saw. Now, I was 10 years old. I didn't see anything, but I read the newspapers, and I saw the pictures. And so I was aware of that from a very early age. And I've been interested, so to speak, ever since. But it wasn't until 1965, many years later, when, as a trained professional, I realized that the problem was within my scope of professional interest. What do people see and how do they remember it? And my conclusions, basically, and I've made these very explicit in print, are some of what people call UFOs are extraterrestrial vehicles. They're spaceships. Some of those UFOs, some of those extraterrestrial vehicles, have ET crews. And the most...
Don, I got to ask this. How do you know this?
I'm telling you what I think. And I've written about how I know this, or why I think this is true, in the longest book I wrote. But we can get to that. The last thing is some of these ET crews kidnap people and poke and prod at them and do things that aren't really very pleasant to them. So we're under investigation by extraterrestrials. That's my story.
And how do you know this, Don?
Well, first of all, when you say no, what you're asking is, what is the evidence? That's the same kind of question the lawyer asks in court when somebody's being convicted of a crime or when some event is being discussed. And the evidence is cumulative. It's been being collected systematically for about 70 years, since roughly 1947. The evidence includes human eyewitness reports that are corroborated by more than one person at a time. The evidence includes radar plots with corresponding visual observations. The evidence includes multiple sightings by different people of the same thing at the same time. And it includes combinations of radar images, visual reports by people, even gun camera photographs taken from jet fighters chasing UFOs. So all of this is cumulative evidence that there are ETs around this planet, inspecting us, if you like, interfering with us now and then, and leaving enough traces so that we have evidence of it. That's my story. It takes about 320 pages to tell that story in a book, and it takes me about 20 hours to give a lecture on this lectures on this subject in a course I teach at McGill.
Got it. So Don, what about actual personal communications with ETs? You have.
What happens is this: I don't have any. I'm just an observer, and if you like, a scientist. I'm not anybody who's experienced any of this myself. I have talked to lots of people who have, but I'm an observer here, and if you want to put it that way, a kind of trained observer, because I know what to look for. I know more or less how to detect what you'd call politely BS when somebody's talking it, and so I'm in a little better position than the average person to make a judgment about whether somebody's report is reliable. And the totality of this evidence is that sometimes people come into contact with the ETs, not voluntarily. They don't go looking for them, but they will be abducted from their home. They'll be taken out of a car that's driven off the side of a road. They may be walking out in the woods and are abducted from a campsite. These things happen. People come back. They have flashbacks. They may not remember, but what they do remember is this. They saw a UFO up close. There's missing time. They don't know what happened for an hour or two after that. Then they wake up again, and they're driving their car down the road, and they don't know how they got that far. Or they find they're back in their bed, but their shoes are on, or their bedclothes are disarranged. In other words, there's many cases of individuals who've had unwanted and unexpected encounters with extraterrestrials, where the extraterrestrials have done something to them, leaving them with a blank spot in their memories for an hour or more. Later on, got that. Sometimes that blank spot can be filled by having an expert, a good counselor, come in and counsel that person. And sometimes the person has flashbacks or dreams. But the reports are consistent. And humans, not all of us by any means, and I have no clear idea of what percentage of us, are being, if you want to put it in plain language, hassled by extraterrestrials.
Got it. So, well, first of all, Don, have you since then have you ever experienced being abducted, or have you seen any UFOs or experienced aliens or anything like that?
Well, no, for everything except one. I was on my back porch, looking out the back door of my back porch. My upstairs back porch in Montreal at this time was also next to my study, so I'd finished doing some work for a course or something of the sort, stepped outside to look at the sky, and saw a light bouncing across the sky, and that little flying saucer movement you probably can imagine, dipping and then flying up and dipping and flying up, and it went past. It was in view for maybe a minute and then disappeared. Now that was not an airplane. It was not a bird. It was brightly lit. It was dark, and so that was the kind of minimal observation that anyone would ever think of reporting as a UFO. And frankly, if that's all anyone has ever seen, there'd be no story, because that isn't really enough information. But you asked me whether I'd ever seen anything like that, and the answer is yes. And my wife and her sister were out on a pier in the Adirondacks, the mountains to the south of us here in Montreal, and they saw something like that in the sky as well. But those are the only things that have ever been a part of a UFO experience in my immediate family.
I mean, how long ago was that?
Oh, that was years ago, maybe 20 years ago at the earliest.
So it's been a while.
That was a long time ago, and I've never had any other kinds of experience at all.
Now, was that before you created this API, or after you created the API?
Long before. This API that you talked about is really very much a joint effort, and I didn't do most of the work. I did some of the work.
I hear you.
Important people here are one guy who was a close friend and died, but a very good and well-known UFO researcher named Bud Hopkins. The other man was a social worker, very much alive and well, named Ted Davis. And Hopkins and Davis put together, which was intended to sort people out, to see whether or not they had been abducted. Because many people might think that they've been abducted, might have some missing time, might have an idea it might be a romantic thing to say happened to you, might have some suspicion that something they didn't understand happened some time ago. And so what Bud and Ted wanted to do was to figure out some kind of test you could give to people, paper and pencil test, that would help them, these experts, sort out whether the person's experience was enough like other abductees to think that their case was trustworthy. And so they developed something called the Hopkins-Davis test. Now this test, 608 true-false questions. That's a lot of questions. They knew me, and they decided they'd ask me, because I was a psychologist with some statistical training, to help them validate the test. And what that means is that I was going to help them figure out whether the test actually sorted out the abductees from other people. Now, how do we do that? it's pretty straightforward, but not as simple as you think. You give the test to people who the experts think are abducted. And Bud and Ted had 50-odd, I can't recall the exact number, of people whose stories were very convincing to them. These are people who'd had remembered abduction experiences or had them recalled in dreams or sometimes under hypnosis. And Bud was a very careful researcher. His colleague David Jacobs, who's also a friend and another researcher, helped with this. And they put together a set of people they were pretty certain had been abducted by extraterrestrials. They asked me to help find some other people who hadn't been abducted by extraterrestrials. So up at McGill, where I had access to students to help me do research and a big population of people, we got a lot of people, I think 25 or 30, who we had no reason to think had ever been abducted. They were just what you'd call in a scientific study controls, people we had no reason to think had any experience with aliens whatsoever. And then we got another sample. Again, I'm not sure the exact number, 60 or so. So people who we didn't think had been abducted, but like almost everybody in America and Canada, they knew about aliens. They knew about UFOs. Everybody has seen Star Wars. Everybody knows Star Trek. So the idea that there are extraterrestrials, there are different civilizations, people come and go in spaceships, was very familiar to all these people. We had no reason to think they'd been abducted, but we did ask them, and they all agreed. They knew all about this as fiction. You know, they all seen the movies. They'd all heard the accounts. They all knew what an abduction was. So these people, we had no reason to believe ever were abducted. But what we asked them to do was take the test as if they'd been abducted. So now we have three groups of people. The real abductees, the ones that Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs and Ted Davis thought really were abducted because their stories were convincing and detailed. And these are not comfortable stories, by the way. People don't like this, but they do report it, and they report it reliably and similarly. That's one group. Second group, controls, people who we had no reason to think ever had any experiences like this. We asked them to take this test, but we didn't tell them why. We're a psychology laboratory, so we said, we're just studying, we're trying to develop a new personality test. Will you help us, please, by taking this test? Eventually, we'll be using it clinically, but you're not clinical subjects. We just want you to take the test. Thank you very much. Gave them a small amount of money for it. Then we had a third group. These are the people who we knew understood what abductions were about because they'd seen the movies, they'd read the stories, they knew the background. We said, please, fake the test. Pretend that you've been abducted and take this test to answer it to convince us you've been abducted. So we had three groups of people, the real abductees, the controls, and then the so-called fake abductees or fakers. And we asked each group to take this 608-question test, the Hopkins-Davis test. And when they finished, and I used statistical techniques, which are too complicated to explain, even in a lecture, certainly on the phone, we were able to sort these three groups out completely. And the difference was this. The least extreme group, the people whose answers gave us the least reason to think they'd been abducted, were the controls. The most extreme group were the people who we asked to fake it. They answered all over the place, and their answers made it look like they'd really been, they'd had lots of experiences with aliens, they'd had lots of nasty things happening to them, and so forth and so on. The group in the middle were the actual real abductees. So we were able to sort these people out very clearly on this big 608 true-false question test. What's even better, we could sort them out on the basis of only 65 questions. So we boiled it down from a 608-question test to a 65-question test, and that's a tool we can now use to get a handle on whether somebody who's had something that they think might be an abduction experiences is likely to really have been abducted. It doesn't prove it. Now, this is something, Andrew, you have to understand, and everybody listening has to understand. There's no absolute proof that somebody's been abducted. You don't get a brand. You don't get a little tag saying, I've been abducted. You don't get necessarily any skin marks or things like that prove the aliens have been at you. It's a matter of answering questions that we think are reliable. And so what we have, and this is all we have, is a test of true-false questions that we can give to people to make an estimate of how likely it is we think they've been abducted. And that's what the research I've done is all about. And that's all it is. It's very empirical. It's not proof in capital letters that somebody's been abducted. It just makes us think it's more likely that they have or haven't, depending on how the test comes out. So that's a very complicated way of saying nothing is certain in this crazy world. It's a very complicated phenomenon. I'm not sure how many people in America or on the planet have been abducted and have been messed around with by aliens, but I certainly think a few have, and I have no doubt that a few have in Arizona and nearby New Mexico and California, for that matter.
I don't know that I've ever been abducted. I have reason to believe it's a possibility, but I can't. I have never gone to confirm that ever. I haven't gone to, and maybe I should take your test. I don't know. Maybe that would signify something to me. But I've never been hypnotized. You're not a hypnotist, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm not. I'm not a clinician at all. I have no clinical credentials.
I'm wondering if we got you trained to be a hypnotist, what that would do for you. I have a feeling it would be help you out a lot. But anyhow,
it would make me work a lot harder. Put it that way, Andrew. Because
right.
I've got a lot of work. I think you mentioned in the introduction. I actually have a profession as well. I do work in human factors and ergonomics, and that takes a fair amount of my time. And this is the other part of my time that takes, basically. But there are good people who are hypnotists, and it's an advantage to have that skill. I agree completely.
Exactly. So now you over the years, you don't know how many people out of either the world or United States, how many people have actually been abducted. If you were to guess, in terms of all the information you've ever come across, how many people were actually abducted? How many people do you think have been abducted in just in the United States alone, or the whole world?
Well, let me go back. I can give you a tentative answer to that, and it wasn't something I did at all. Back in 1991, a man named Robert Bigelow, whose name has come up more recently in the UFO world, put money up to give a test across America to a sample of about 6,000 people in what's called the Roper poll. Now, I don't know if this is still being done, but in the old days, before the internet, when people wanted to find out what people in America thought about something, whether it was a product or a political opinion or something of the sort, they would hire a polling company to go door to door, knock on doors, and get people to answer questions. Now, Bigelow put up money so that three people, Bud Hopkins, Ron Westrom, a well-known social psychologist, and David Jacobs, would develop a short questionnaire of just 11 questions that the pollsters would ask door to door that were supposed to indicate whether or not people had had this abduction experience. Now, this was done back in 1990-91. The test was given door to door to about 6,000 Americans. And when Jacobs, Ron Westrom, and Bud Hopkins analyzed the results, they came to the conclusion at the time that something like 3% of the American population had been abducted. And that's 3% of many million people, 130, 140 million people. I've forgotten what the total is right now. That's a lot of people. But when that result came out, I had some questions about it. And that's how I got involved in doing this research, because Hopkins and Ted Davis asked me to help them with a more comprehensive test, the one that they developed that had 608 questions in it. Now, we haven't given our boiled-down American personality inventory to more than a total of about 300 people altogether. And on that basis, I'm not ready to predict how many people in America have been abducted. It might be as many as 3%, but I can't prove that, and I wouldn't stand by that number without further information.
So you're saying as many as I don't know, several 100,000 people is what we're talking about. Is that correct?
That's correct, at the minimum. Yep.
Wow. So that is a lot. But over the years, I don't know, and it's undetermined. So now with that in mind, Don, how accurate do you think this test is in terms of substantiating that somebody has been abducted or not?
The honest answer is I don't know. What's happening now, and I'll be reporting on this at the MUFON Symposium, is that MUFON is cooperating with me, and this test is being made available to people who report possible abduction experiences through the MUFON website, MUFON researchers. And with those people, many of whom have claimed to be abducted, the test gives what you call positive results. It confirms that they've been abducted. But I can't say, and I won't say, how many people or what percentage of the people in this country I think have been abducted. I just don't know. The answer is more than one and less than all. And that doesn't help much, but that's the closest I come to an answer.
So with that in mind, Don, first of all, I'm sensing that it has about 85% accuracy rating. That's what I'm picking up and sensing, which doesn't mean
no
anything
way to know.
Else. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything.
Honest as I can with you, I can't say.
Yeah.
The only standard we have is that, and again, remember, this is experts' opinion. It's not as if somebody's branded like a cow saying, I've been abducted, so you know that there's a sign that person's been abducted. You have to infer that from what they've said, their experiences that they remember, and the combination of things that give you a clue are they've had what's consciously recalled as missing time. I was out walking, I came back 3 hours later, I don't know where I was or how I got back or what happened in between. That's the missing time. The second thing is they recall seeing close up a UFO. So the story that persuades you to look further into somebody's life is they were out in a car or on foot or just standing outside their house. They saw a UFO. Then 2 hours pass. They don't know what happened. They find themselves back in bed or on the road driving somewhere where they hadn't been before. And those two things, the missing time and the close encounter, are clues. And both of those consciously recalled. This is not hypnosis. This is not questionnaires. This is just something people can tell you. If people can tell you two things. One, I saw a UFO close up, some shiny big object in the sky at night that didn't look like an airplane and was just hovering maybe a couple of 100 feet away or down the road. And then I don't know what happened for an hour or so. I don't recall a thing. I woke up back in my bed or walking down the road or driving down the road, but I don't know what happened before that. Those two clues are clues that you've been abducted by extraterrestrials. And
well,
the American population has had those two experiences, I don't know.
Exactly.
A lot of people who write to MUFON or go onto their website have had those experiences.
Well, Don, what I'm seeing is that this is a very helpful tool to even just give people peace of mind. They got this experience. A lot of people go through PTSD because of this, and sometimes just getting peace of mind helps with that PTSD. And something like this could be very helpful and instrumental for that. And there's so many people out there that still haven't come forward with those abduction experiences. There's who knows how many, hundreds of thousands, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people still that haven't come forward with the experience that they've gone through concerning being abducted or whatever. So I see that this is a very helpful tool for that process, and so that will help them to take take their next step, and their next step beyond taking the test would be, of course, to be healed, to be treated for abduction. And I don't know all the process for that, but it seems like being hypnotized and then being who knows, it could even be medications. I don't know what all the procedures were for treating somebody that's been abducted or not, but it has to do with via PTSD. I'm sure of it. So anyhow, now what I want to do
right, Andrew, is this. The
Go
two
ahead.
people I know best who dealt with this very seriously and very well were the late Bud Hopkins, who met abductees in his house, and they met monthly to talk among themselves about their experiences, which made them feel better. And David Jacobs, who dealt with many abductees very much the same way. Neither Bud nor David had any clinical training whatsoever, neither do I. But having somebody to talk to who takes your problem seriously, knowing that there are other people in the world who have the same problem, is at least reassuring in the sense that it makes you feel you're not alone, and you have other people to basically pat you on the back or make you feel that you're not experiencing this by yourself. And that's the best. There's one person who's in our life, more or less, who comes in now and then to talk about her experiences, but I'm not in this in what you might call a big way. And so that's how I can describe this. There are other people in Montreal who do that as well, by the way.
So what I want to do now is take a little break here now, Don. Play some music by Daniel Call from his album Elephant Prayer, a song called Ramachandra. I want to send out love, blessings, healings, angels of light and love to all those people that have been abducted, to their family and friends, to you, of course, Don, and your family and friends, to me and my family and friends, to all our vehicles, places of residence, help take care of us. To the President of the United States, man, that guy needs some help. Oh, my God. And all his entourage, to all the kids and the animals and the plants on the planet, especially the ones that need concern. Anybody else you want to add to that, Don?
Oh, I think you've covered a lot of them. Thank you, Andrew. That's very nice of you to ask. You've done a pretty good job yourself.
And of course, we'll send out love, blessings, healings, angels of light and love to everyone else in need and concern. We will be back. Ramachandra by Daniel Paul from his album Elephant Prayer, and we'll continue.
Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare. He Natanarayana, He Natanarayana, Ramachandra Ramare. He Natanarayana, He Natanarayana, Ramachandra Ramare. Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare. He Natanarayana, He Natanarayana, Ramachandra Ramare. He Natanarayana, He Natanarayana, Ramachandra Ramare. Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare. He Natanarayana, He Natanarayana, Ramachandra Ramare. He Natanarayana, He Natanarayana, Ramachandra Ramare. Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare, Shri Ramachandra Ramare. He Natanarayana, He Natanarayana, Ramachandra Ramare. He Natanarayana, He Natanarayana, Ramachandra Ramare. He Natanarayana, He Natanarayana, Ramachandra Ramare.
And we're back. This is Andrew Aloha live out of Flagstaff, Arizona. The Spiritual Image Productions on Blog Talk Radio and Free Conference Call and YouTube, establishing and maintaining right relationships with you. Tonight we're doing Andrew Aloha live. We're talking with Dr. Donderi, all the way out of Canada, in the American Personality Inventory, a test to evaluate abduction reports. We talked to Don about him growing up in New York and the East Coast, and eventually getting married and moving to Canada. He went to Cornell University and a couple of other universities, or at least one other. And his father did similar stuff. Now, is that correct, Don? Your father did some similar things that you're doing or were doing in the Navy as well? Don, are you with us?
Andrew, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to somebody else. Yes, I'm with you. I just lost contact for a minute, but I'm back.
Yes. So your dad was in the Navy, and by the way, I got to say, today, for those of you that are nearby, live nearby, today, which is an absolutely gorgeous day here in Flagstaff, Arizona. A little bit windy, but just perfect day. But anyhow, your dad was in the Navy, and he did some similar things that you did or are doing. Is that correct?
Well, he was a commercial artist, Andrew. He actually was good at drawing and painting, and he ran an advertising studio in New York City. But during the war, he took those artistic skills to designing training manuals for sailors and airmen in the U.S. Navy, and he did that work out of Washington, D.C. So my early experience for a year or so was around Washington, in growing up in the suburbs of Washington, going to his office occasionally and meeting some of the people he worked with. But that was his contribution to the U.S. war effort during World War II. The Navy took his professional skills and put them to work developing training materials for soldiers and sailors and airmen particularly.
Right. So now, and before we go on, I want to say this. Some of the other speakers that are going to be speaking in New Jersey at Cherry Hill at the symposium are Louise Elizondo, Dr. John Bradenberg, Lynn Chete, Nick Pope, Dr. Bob Wood, Ted Peters, Dave Palide, and of course Don Randall Nickerson, who will be interviewing on July 8th, and then Thelma Siddick, Travis Walton, Kathleen Martin, and Peter Robbins, who's going to be actually even though he's got a wealth of information, he's going to be the MC for the symposium. So now, Don, are you guys going to make this test available for people to take at the symposium?
At the moment, only through MUFON. It's not something that we don't have any plans to distribute other than through MUFON, but MUFON's website is widely available, and people who think they've had these experiences can contact MUFON through the MUFON website and talk to the experiencer research team, which is what they call it in MUFON. And those are the people, me included, who are looking into the frequency with which this happens and the details of people's experiences. There are two things that people who have these experiences and go to the MUFON website can do. They can fill out a very complete and thorough questionnaire about their experiences, and then they can also complete this short 65 true-false questionnaire as well. The long questionnaire is very detailed and gives MUFON a background, a great deal of detail about the experiences that each person has had. The shorter questionnaire gives us a little bit of greater certainty about how likely these experiences are to be real. But the two questionnaires, the long one and the short one, are both available through MUFON. And at the moment, since the Internet is widely available to everyone and MUFON's site is on the Internet, we figure that's the best way to distribute it.
Don, what I'm thinking is, I think you guys should make this available, like maybe on Saturday, all day on Saturday, for people to free for all come in and take the test, the long test, and just for the hell of it, to see if that's maybe they're thinking, oh, well, maybe I have a consideration that I have been abducted, or maybe they're just curious and want to know, and maybe some of these people have would never think that they've been abducted, but all of a sudden they take the test, and the test substantiates that they have been abducted to some level or another. So, I'm just thinking, you guys should have it made available, like have a certain room that people can go into and just take the test, to see what's happening.
Well, that's an idea, Andrew. Thanks for suggesting it. I'll take that up with Kathleen Martin, who's the director of this group, and see what she thinks. I'll give it some thought.
Because I think a lot of people maybe it's in the back of their head. Have I ever been abducted? And they don't have any. Sometimes it's a process. Some of these people have been abducted, and they don't think anything about it. And then all of a sudden, 10, 15 years, 20 years down the road, all of a sudden it hits them. And you know this. Some of these people, they've been abducted, and it doesn't hit them for about 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden things start happening, weird things start happening, and all of a sudden you come to find out they've been abducted, and all these years they've been dealing with it and never actually confronted it. So maybe this might be a process for them to confront something sooner than not, and maybe they need it'll speed up the process for them, and they can deal with it sooner than later, and which will be a lot more helpful for them, I'm sure of it.
Well, in my experience, and the experience of many people I've read about and worked with, it's more likely that the first things that you remember are the missing time and the close encounter. And those are pretty good clues to having been abducted. If you've got those memories in your background and have never worked it out, that's quite possibly an indication that you have been. But I think it's less likely that people, and some people have flashbacks. In other words, without any prompting, they'll come up with dreams or just even flashes of memory about something like that sometime afterwards. Those are pretty well established as indicators that something like this might have happened. I think it's less likely that someone who's now 50 will take a test and it will show that that person was abducted at the time he was 15 or 20 without there being some intermediate awareness, like a feeling of discomfort around a certain place, vague memories of a UFO or something like that. So there are a variety of cues. This test, this 65 true-false questions, is only one of many possible routes to knowing whether that's happened or not. It's a useful one, but not the only one for sure. But I'll talk to Kathleen about that. It's an idea. Thanks for suggesting it.
I think people would be willing just to attend the conference on Saturday. Let's say you did this test all day on Saturday for about 8 hours, from 8 to 5 p.m. or something like that. I think people would be willing just to come in just to see if they have been abducted. Because they want to know, have I been abducted? And you know, because I've had at least one paranormal experience. I didn't remember. It was like all this event took place, and then 5 years later, I completely forgot about it. My mind just completely blocked it out until about 5 years later, literally, and then all of a sudden everything came back. I remembered everything. So I think this was with that process.
That's a possibility. That's a possibility, Andrew. I'll think about it. I'll talk to Kathleen about it.
So now, these people, Ted and Bud, what made them decide to want to come up with this test? All of a sudden they go, oh yeah, let's put together a test. What made them really want to put all this together?
Well, what I think happened, Andrew, was this: Bud Hopkins and Ron Westrom and David Jacobs were involved in developing this 11-questionnaire that was given out to thousands of people, 6,000 roughly, during a period in 1990 by the Roper Poll organization. And these 11 questions came back to the investigators, these three people, and based on the answers to those 11 questions, as I said, they came up with the possibility that as many as 3% of Americans had been abducted, which, as you can imagine, is a huge number. At the meeting where that evidence was presented, I was there, and I raised some objections, not serious, not impolite objections, I assure you, but I said, you have to follow that up. That was 11 questions, and you didn't really get close enough to the problem to define it as clearly as you wanted. So after I made these suggestions, and basically, if you understand the scientific research business at all, you know that researchers are always criticizing each other with the best of intentions, because they'll say to each other, well, you missed this point, you've got to go back and look at that. And that's basically what I was saying to Westrom and to Hopkins and to David Jacobs. Well, you've got 11 questions there. They didn't really cover a lot, and there were many other questions you could follow up with, and you should have an interview with these people and so forth and so on. I made a lot of suggestions. I got a call a couple of months later from Hopkins saying, well, can you help us with this? Because what we had done, and this was Hopkins and his buddy, Ted Davis, was they had developed a longer test, one they thought was more thorough and would cover the job better. And that was this 608 true-false question inventory that they developed. And so they asked me to help them with this inventory, which I did. So this was a follow-up to the Roper Poll. And my role in this, as I explained earlier, was to find people who we had no reason to think were abducted, to get them to take the test, and get people to fake the test, people who we wanted to basically mess around with the test to try and fool the investigators into thinking that they had been abducted. So when we did this, we were able to sort out those three groups unequivocally, without any overlap, on the basis of 65 of these 608 questions. So that's why we have this shorter questionnaire. And we can still administer it to people and still give a probability that a person is either going to be an abductee or a control who's never had the experience, or somebody who's just trying to pull the wool over our eyes. And we can do that. But the test alone is not the evidence that somebody's been abducted. It's sort of a follow-up on what their other experiences are.
Now, if what you say is correct, Don, we're talking about over 11 million people that have been abducted, potentially.
Possibly, something like that.
And that's and even half of that, which is 1.5%. That's 6 million, 5 million people. That's an awfully lot of people that's been abducted. I mean, that's a huge amount to play around with, which means that there's a lot, over 5 million, over 6 million, over 11 million people out there and I'm sure that every person that's ever been abducted has PTSD. Is it safe to say that?
Well, I'm not sure that's right, because I've known several who don't.
Oh, really?
Straightforward. I've met people who have adapted pretty well to this experience and who carry on normal lives without obvious signs of distress, and some of them very successful people in their line of work. I actually know a few. Got it.
So, but either way, that's a lot of people to deal with, which means that there's a lot of work for people to do. That's what I think. But that's so. So, some of these people that have been abducted, Don, what were their experiences? What did did it last for a day? Can you tell us some of these stories at all?
Well, I can. Many of them, other people have written lots of books about this. There are scores. At least I can think of a dozen good books. One of them was called Witnessed. It was written by Bud Hopkins and published in the 90s. He also wrote a book called Missing Time, which has many abduction stories in it. David Jacobs has written 3 books, one called The Threat, one called They Walk Among Us, and the third book has a title I can't recall. So that's at least 6 books right there from David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins. Whitley Strieber wrote a book about his own experiences. John Mack wrote a book about people's abduction experiences. So there's a rich literature of abduction researchers recording and presenting the experiences of people who claim to have been abducted. And in my own book, which was written as in a sense, a summary and an argument about whether this stuff was true or not, I present 4 or 5 cases, including some very well-known ones that I didn't originate by any means. And so there is a lot of evidence. Here's an example. The classic Barney and Betty Hill case, which you may have heard of, and certainly it was written up back in 1965 by an excellent journalist named John Fuller. Barney and Betty, recently married, both divorced, and this was their second marriage. Unusual for the time. Barney, a African-American post office worker. Betty, a white New Hampshire woman. With her dog, they took a honeymoon trip through New York State into Canada, back through Montreal, on their way back to New Hampshire, going down what was then Route 3 and is now Interstate 93. They were followed by a large luminous object which hovered over the road. They were forced against their will to drive off the main road onto a dirt road. Then they were abducted into the UFO. Both Barney and Betty were subjected to various kinds of medical procedures, including those having a sexual nature. Sperm was extracted from Barney. Betty's reproductive organs were scanned and studied. Then they were put back on the ground, and they drove home and came back about 3 hours after they were supposed to get back. These experiences occurred. They had some flashbacks. They had some puzzling memories of the close encounter, which is I've already mentioned, and they remembered the missing time. And then they were both very upset about this. They had some physical symptoms as well. They went to a very good psychiatrist in Boston, and he hypnotized them and individually collected their stories. And the stories that I've just reported in very brief detail were the stories that came out under hypnosis, separately, Barney and Betty. And the book called The Interrupted Journey is a classic in the field, published in 1965. It's widely available. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. it's a good starting place if you want to read about an abduction experience. And that's, in a sense, a classic case. There's another case much closer to home, that is my home, although it also happened in New England, on Lake Champlain in, I can't recall the exact year, early 90s, I believe. Two camp counselors were out on their dock after dark. The rest of the campers had gone, and the rest of the counseling staff had gone into the nearby Burlington, which is a major city in Vermont on Lake Champlain, and a UFO came and hovered over their dock where the two counselors, one woman and one man, were just lounging and chatting with each other, abducted both of them, subjected them to various kinds of medical probes, and put them back on the dock. The returning campers got back in time to see the UFO leave. So there were multiple observers of the UFO leaving, and the two of them staggering around on the dock, not knowing what had happened to them. And that book is thoroughly written up, called Encounter at Buff Ledge, by a writer named Walter Webb. And both of those books are full accounts of very detailed abduction experiences collected by experienced researchers, fully investigated, and details obtained under hypnosis as well as voluntary recall. So for any of your listeners who are interested, just go to the web and try one of the websites. I suppose I shouldn't advertise which one, but everybody knows which one has the most books, and look up abduction narratives, and you'll find plenty of accounts. And those two, The Interrupted Journey by John Fuller and Encounter at Buff Ledge by Walter Webb, are two I highly recommend.
So these people, they take the test, the API, and then what? What happens? They discover, yeah, I've been abducted. It's a good probability that I've been abducted. What then? What happens then? What should they do then?
Absolutely nothing. There's nothing that goes with the test that they can do that will help confirm or disconfirm what they've experienced. And as I said, the test is now available through the MUFON Experiencer Research Team. If you've contacted MUFON because you think this has been your experience, you can take the MUFON abduction survey, which is a very thorough one about everything that might have happened to you, and you can also take this test, and you will be in contact with the MUFON Experiencer Research Team, and probably, because this is how the information is obtained in the first place, with some local MUFON field investigator who will take your case and talk to you about it. There is no therapy as such. We don't give out a pin saying I've been abducted. It's just an experience that you had, and I'd say, on the whole, an unfortunate experience that you wouldn't have volunteered for if you'd been given the choice.
So why isn't there some kind of a therapy or some kind of healing modality to help these people, Don? I don't understand.
Well, frankly, other than talking about it, I wouldn't know what to do. Quite honestly, the experience is probably better shared than not shared, and that's why abduction researchers talk to the people who've been abducted, often meet them in groups, and often discuss their experiences with them. I've met individuals like this, and sometimes there's just not much you can do about it. It's, again, I put an example of this in the book. We treat four-footed animals very much the way the extraterrestrials are treating us. I use an example. People in helicopters who are interested in studying bears, for example, go up in helicopter, they see a bear lumbering through the grass or the brush at the edge of the woods. Somebody fires a tranquilizing dart into the bear. The bear keels over, the helicopter lands. You put the bear in a big sack, pull the bear into a laboratory, probe the bear, test its digestive system, test its brain, do what you like. Then you put a little tracking chip in the bear, you drag the bear back to the woods, drop it off, and the bear wakes up, scratches its head. It's had missing time, it doesn't know what the heck has happened, and goes about its business. But the abductees, that is the researchers, keep a track of the bear, but they don't give the bear therapy. No, the ETs aren't giving their abductees therapy.
Right.
Andrew, I don't know what kind of therapy to give them except recognizing that it's a problem sympathizing with them and telling them they're not alone.
Don, I've already said this, and I don't, and you're right. I don't know that it applies to everyone, but I'm almost 100% sure that pretty much anybody that's been abducted is along the lines of that can be treated along the lines as PTSD. I'm pretty sure of it, and maybe it wouldn't be exactly the therapy wouldn't be exactly like you would treat any other PTSD person, that's been through some kind of event, and maybe it is because again they've gone through some kind of event, a traumatic event that's out of this world or out of their mind or whatever, and I think that would be the best way to treat abduction cases or people with abduction that had been abducted. Now you brought up another point. The bear would be marked with some kind of a device. Would these people that have been abducted need to be treated similar? Should they be marked with some kind of device in case they were abducted again? And with that in mind, how many, what percentage of these 3% of people of the United States citizens that have been assumably abducted or potentially abducted will be abducted again and again and again? Well, how many people out of those people will be abducted again? Or do you know?
Well, the answer is I don't know, Andrew. I can't tell you. But what I do know is that some people are abducted multiple times. There's evidence about that, and others aren't. And why? In the one case, yes. In the other case, no. I don't know. And as far as giving therapeutic help, I'm not qualified to say what the best help is because I'm not a qualified therapist to start with. And as I said, I've met people who have confirmed that they have been abducted and who have managed with a minimum of professional help to get along all right. As I also said, the only people who do this in a very helpful way that I know of are the people like Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs who have talked individually and in groups to people who've had this experience and let them share the experiences among themselves.
Got it. And out of all these abductees, people that have been abducted, Don, is there anything that's significant, anyone out there of significance that their story was so pretty out of this world that it's like just interesting to note or something, anything like that?
You mean, is there anything that distinguishes these people from other people? I don't think so. I think they come from all walks of life, from all social economic statuses, men and women, and young children as well. And sometimes it's a family thing. That's the other thing that I can say that I hadn't mentioned earlier. There are generational abductees, people whose parents have been abducted, the children are abducted, and their children are abducted. That's known from the evidence. And again, that suggests that the people doing the abductions, the extraterrestrials, are interested in family histories. They're probably interested in genetic linkages, but that's an area not very well explored and certainly remains to be studied. It's a good question.
Got it. So now, what's the name of your book? I don't know that you mentioned that. Did you mention the name of your book?
I didn't, but I'd be glad to, of course. It's called UFOs, ETs, and Alien Abductions. A Scientist Looks at the Evidence.
Yeah, I now that I remember, I mentioned when I was reading your introduction, I did say the name of your book, and right. So this talks about a lot of the stuff that has to do with the API and abductees and so forth, or what's this book about?
It doesn't have much to do with the API because that's work that was done. Well, it's part of it, but a very small part. It's mostly about the history of the UFO phenomenon, when it began, all of the controversy that surrounded it. Remember, the idea that there are extraterrestrial UFOs is not widely accepted. It was denied vigorously by the U.S. government up until very recently. So the book covers that part of the history. It covers the history of scientific disbelief and the background of that scientific disbelief. If you look into the what you might call the official recognition of the UFO problem, there isn't any.
It is not recognized as a problem in universities. It has not, until recently, been recognized as a problem by any U.S. government agency, although it has been in England and France and Belgium, among other places. The problem is basically so implicitly frightening and so destructive of human sense of knowledge about the world that active study of the problem has been resisted vigorously in scientific circles and by the elite media for the last 40 or 50 years. That's begun to change, and you may have noticed the change yourself, because in December 16th, as a matter of fact, of last year, there was a front page story in the New York Times written by three people, one of whom was Leslie Kean, a journalist I happen to know, about the UFO investigation group in the Pentagon. And the story featured a man who's going to be talking at the MUFON Symposium in July. His name is Louis Elizondo, and he was the manager of this UFO research group. He resigned in protest in part over the fact that nobody paid attention to the research. And this story came out and was given front page coverage in the Sunday Times, which is a breakthrough because elite media, so-called, the newspapers of record and stations of record haven't paid attention to this in any detail at all with anything other than mild ridicule for the last 60 years. Then in March of 2018, another person, a former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, a man named Christopher Mellon, came out and repeated the same complaint that the U.S. government was investigating UFOs, but nobody's doing anything about it, and it's time that that changed. So here were two former Pentagon officials, each breaking the silence in a major American newspaper, in one case on the op-ed page, and the other case on the front page, with a statement that the U.S. government has been studying UFOs, that the UFOs are, they didn't say this, but the UFOs are probably extraterrestrial, and at the same time, the Pentagon released, and I'm sure everybody in the States has seen this, and most people in Canada, 2 sets of video footage from gun cameras in U.S. Navy jet fighters chasing UFOs. So everybody has seen the UFOs being chased by the jets, has heard the pilots exclaim about them with expletives deleted, and you've seen that twice, once over the Atlantic and once over the Pacific. So the whole ballgame has changed in the last 6 months, basically.
Yeah, it was in the last year. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, everybody now knows that the U.S. government studies UFOs. The evidence is clear that the UFOs that these pilots were chasing were not airplanes, and they weren't helicopters, and they weren't weather balloons. They were extraterrestrial. And the cat's out of the bag. So the whole thing has changed. That's why the MUFON conference in July is going to be focused on the meaning of this to humanity. We've got to face the fact that we're in the presence, the immediate presence, of technologically superior beings who can control us by capturing us against our will, taking us into their spaceships, probing around, and putting us back again.
But Don, when you say control us, Don, you're not meaning just 1 or 2 people or one state or one country. I mean, they can control the whole planet, period, and destroy it.
We don't know where this is going to lead. We don't know where this is going to lead, but that's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, and for them to take that action, it's not very highly likely. It's a possibility, a very minute type possibility, but that's not how they operate. Because again, they're highly evolved beings. They don't have a need to operate like that in the form of fire, unless they're provoked and it's absolutely necessary.
Because they're highly involved doesn't make them nice.
Yeah, and that's true too. That's absolutely very true. So now, and you're right. Lately, within the last several months, there's been stories trickling out, through the newspapers, through the media, about different events that have taken place, and they've been leaking out little 1 or 2 stories here and there, and I don't know, but they're old stories. Took place back in 2004. 2001 or what, they're old stories, but they're still they are trickling a few stories here and there to let the public know, the government has been encountering UFOs and all kinds of other stuff as well.
Well, you're absolutely right, Andrew. The stories are there. The major newspapers have begun to cover them. MUFON conference will certainly cover them thoroughly, and I hope you're there too. Are you going to be there?
Yeah, that's my agenda. I'm just working with just a day-to-day thing, but yeah, I'm scheduled to be there for sure.
Well, I hope you are, and I'm looking forward to meeting you if you are.
Yeah, definitely. I'll make a point to stop by and in the booth and at least say hi. Now, if you guys do decide to make this test available, I would like to take that test. And just I'm curious. I'm not 100% that I'm missing some time, but I think when I was in the Air Force, there was a time frame where I think I may have been missing time, but I'm not 100%. And so I'd be interested in taking the test, especially if you haven't made available for the whole public to take.
Well, you certainly can. You can take it by going onto the website now, the MUFON website, and contacting Experience or Research Team. You can leave a note on there for Kathleen Martin, and I'll mention it to Kathleen the next time I write her a note too. Yeah,
definitely. I think you guys would attract a lot of people just doing that, making that offer. I'll put it out there. Just all day long, just have a separate room where people can just walk in, take the test, anonymous if they want, and just to see, if something's going on with them, just to confirm them then one way or another, and then in one way or another, it'll still be peace of mind for a lot of these people. You know what I'm saying? I think that would be helpful.
Well, thanks for making the suggestion, Andrew. I will certainly bring it up with Kathleen, who's in charge of that. We'll see what goes down.
So, now what day are you presenting on, Don?
I'm presenting on Sunday. It'll be Sunday morning, I think about 9:30 a.m. after breakfast.
Sunday morning, okay, got it. And is there any other thing that's going on that you're going to be doing between now and then or afterwards?
Well, at the conference, a couple of things, but I don't have the schedule in front of me, so I can't tell you.
Okay. So anyhow, go ahead.
I'll be there for the full 3 days of the conference.
Oh, good. And you're going to have a booth there, right?
I believe I will, yeah, to sell the book.
All right, and I want to thank all of you for stopping by. Have a God week, and again, if you happen to be there, stop by and say hi. Have God week. Be the love that you.
Okay, Andrew. Well, thanks very much.